I'm Bryan Adler with Rothkoff Law Group. I'm a board-certified elder law attorney. I'm joined here today by Kathleen Magee. Let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Magee, Director of Care Coordination.
And also Tony and Melissa Ricci, who are the children of clients of ours, Jerry and Marie Ricci. We invited them on today to share their experiences, both with long-term care, nursing home care, and end-of-life decision-making. They have a particularly powerful story that I think is really valuable, and a lot of people watching this will get something out of it. So first, I just wanted to welcome you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
And just so everybody's aware, they have 3 dogs at home. One is a 6-month-old puppy, a German Shepherd who's gorgeous. He may choose to interrupt, but we would welcome it because he's adorable. But let's start off with just share your experience. You know, we've worked together now for about a year. Share your experience with long-term care from when we first met back last October.
Well, we've kind of run the gamut with the different types of care. And when, before the meeting today, I was just kind of reflecting on the whole story, where it all started with my mom. And I mean, it's a very crazy story, because we really got to see everything, from hospitalization all the way through to a very nice assisted living type of situation. In late October, I got a call from my dad telling me that my mom was in the hospital, maybe a stroke. Didn't give me a lot of details. And I rushed to the hospital, which was in New Jersey. I live in Pennsylvania. And I come to find out that my mom didn't have a stroke, but she decided to eat a bottle of Ativan, a lot of them, probably 50 to 70 of them, which takes us way back in the story to, we should have addressed this a long time ago. We tried to, but there was resistance on the part of my parents. It really would have been my dad's call more than my mom, I believe. But my mom and dad were living alone in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Yeah. And my dad was, he was the old school Italian guy wearing the black armband. I'm going to take care of my wife. And
I remember when you guys came in for your initial meeting, that's how he was. He was struggling with, we talked about nursing home placement and assisted living options, and he was struggling with that concept, just mom leaving the home.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So that was my dad. He's a great guy, and he was trying, but it was pretty clear to us that it wasn't working. There were things that he just couldn't handle, and he really didn't want to accept that. In the end, so it appeared that my mom tried to take her life, and later they figured out that she had a UTI, which can be, I learned after the fact, can be really bad for elderly women, can really affect their brain in a way that younger women don't have these symptoms. But anyway, so my mom was in the hospital. It looked really bad. We thought she was going to die, or maybe be relegated to a wheelchair or bed for the rest of her life. And that's kind of when we started talking with you guys, because we were really
concerned for his dad,
concerned for my dad, concerned for my mom. What are we going to do? And at that point, it really seemed like it was in the 11th hour that we were trying to get our heads around this. So we convinced my dad to come and see you guys. And we, during this point, right before that, as my mom was discharged from the hospital, so this is where we run all the different types of care. They sent my mom to a rehab, mental rehab facility.
The senior behavioral health. Yeah.
The behavioral health, called Buttonwood, which is by Fort Dix in New Jersey. And I had never had any experience with a place like that, and I hope I never do.
You both had a very steep learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you were thrown to the wolves immediately.
Yes. Yeah. And this place from here in Pennsylvania was it was pretty far. It seemed out in the woods. It was like what you kind of might expect from a movie in some ways. Not pleasant. And there's a very broad range of individuals in this place, from my mom, who Kathleen ended up going and interviewing, who was just, she got caught up in it. I don't think she belonged there. And there were certainly people that needed to probably stay there. So we had gone a few times there to see my mom. She was going to be there for a little while. And that's when we came to see you guys. And, won't forget this. It was on November 4th of 2019. Brought my dad to your office. We went through everything. For my dad, I think it was like,
it was like a
vapor warp.
When we left your office and we went into the car and we were like talking to him and we're like, this is something that we should have done a long time ago. You should have planned this out. And he made this comment, like he was sad. I think he was kind of like the realization of what was happening and gonna happen. And he said he never wanted to because he always thought it was the end. And we're like, no, it's preparing to protect you for the end.
Yes, he associated looking at these kinds of things as that you're accepting that the end is coming soon. This past weekend, we went to go see my aunt, my dad's sister, and some cousins I haven't seen in a long time in Long Island. And it's interesting. My aunt told me this on the phone previously. She's been telling my dad about these types of arrangements, she said, for probably easily 20 years. Her and my uncle they did this over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so clearly it wasn't the end. She's still around. She's doing very well. She's still
It's the longest end ever.
Yeah. She's like, I'm living to 100.
I could see her living to 100.
Yeah.
She's really, she's in great shape. So
I guess then
the next step was we had come and seen you, and kind of the next step was you told us that we were going to meet Kathleen and some of the team that would come out and kind of give an assessment of my mom and her current state and what her needs were, because obviously our views might be jaded. So we were going to meet her on the 7th at Buttonwood. Mm-hmm. And
I'll never forget the knock on the door.
So I was in the shower, and it was early, and I was just getting out of the shower, and Melissa came up to the bathroom and said, the police are here. And, my heart just sunk, and I knew it couldn't be anything to do with my mom, because I don't think the police would come, but it was really caught me off guard. And I threw some clothes on real quick, came downstairs, invited the policeman in, and he told me that my dad had passed away the day before, in the afternoon, in a pretty horrific car accident that was right across the street from the high school that I went to. So I knew exactly where it was.
And I remember this that morning was, I think you called the office.
Yeah.
And you said there's an emergency and I need to speak to Bryan right away. And we have this saying in our office that there's no elder care emergency, but everything is a crisis to our clients. Because to us, it's a regular Tuesday morning, but to our families, it's a once in a lifetime thing. So you kind of you take a breath, you say, okay, we're going to work, whatever it is, we'll work through this, no matter what the crisis may be. I could not have been prepared for when you and I spoke. I mean, it was truly devastating.
Yeah, it was like honestly, it was a total shock. You're just like standing there. I remember the police talking to him, and I was just standing there, and our older son was getting ready for school upstairs and not thinking that he's hearing the whole thing, and just like you're in shock. You're like, wait, what? Like you just never expected him to pass before her. Like you never expected.
He apparently had no health conditions at all.
He was vibrant. He was energetic. Kathleen, you met him, right?
No.
Okay.
I was due to meet them that morning for the assessment, and Melissa, and kind of to your comments, Bryan, I thought maybe Buttonwood was saying, we're ready for discharge. We have to get her out. That's the type of emergency I was anticipating.
Right.
But when I heard your voice, it was just like I could hear the trembling. It was just so raw. It was such I know it was such a sad call. I just remember that.
Yeah. So it was
threw everything for a real
crazy.
loop. I mean, that was that threw everything literally upside down.
Yeah.
But no doubt about it. My dad, and Bryan, you met my dad on a day when, you know, he's probably scared to death coming to your office, and you know, he's a crazy vibrant guy. I mean,
He was
like,
great. He was a ball buster. He was humorous. He was up. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
So now, you know, we're sitting there so worried about my mom because she's the one that's had previous issues. She's in Buttonwood, all these things. My dad, apparently nothing wrong with him. Now my dad is gone. My mom is scared to death in Buttonwood, and she had a couple things there where the first night she was there, I think
She fell.
she fell out of her
Banged
bed
her head.
and banged her head on a very hard floor. Like the first night there,
Right.
somebody from behind threw a hard object at her, and we would talk to her on the phone, and she would tell us these stories how she was scared to death, and it was kind of like you couldn't help her, you know. So the next phase of this was we had to go drive to Buttonwood, and tell my mom what happened to my dad in Buttonwood.
I remember that conversation with the staff of how do we do this? She's there because of a suicide attempt. Should we include psychiatry? I remember all of these discussions the staff were having was what is the best approach in telling her.
There was even some discussion of waiting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and I do believe that she, for a while, would always like question us, like, is it real? Like,
Yeah.
is he really gone? Like,
Yeah.
for days afterwards. It's like not realizing that it's real. Like, you never expected it.
You can't blame her, even if you just in a normal situation, you wouldn't believe it was real. But all in all, I think she dealt with it pretty well.
Yeah.
Considering. So,
And she left Buttonwood shortly thereafter, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
that much.
no, she was, she had arrived at Buttonwood. That happened.
Yeah, I feel like the next week,
Kathleen was
got-
involved there. And that's when, you know, Kathleen's part in this really ramped up dramatically. You know,
figuring out a place that would
and
accept
I told
her.
myself that I'm not going to get choked up and cry on this
It's
call.
okay.
No,
I was
it's good.
when we were talking about
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But honestly, like, you know, because I'm sitting here, I know we had this call and I'm thinking about it a lot. There's Bear. Like, I could have never done this without you guys, Kathleen, and this one here. I don't know what I would have done. I mean, with, you know, kids at home, not knowing what to expect, and the whole not knowing. I mean, like you said, we ran the gamut. In the end, we saw all of it, but we knew none of it beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, you know, you're just all of a sudden everything's open. You have to figure everything out. We had to figure out funeral. We had to figure out their house. We had to then, most importantly, figure out what was going to happen with Marie and who was going to accept her and help her to like get back physically, and then make sure she's like in a better mental state. And I mean, that's where, you know, Kathleen came in to really help with guiding us, because we had no clue. We didn't even know where to look.
No clue how to navigate that
So
system.
what was Mom's next? So after she left Buttonwood, we went to nursing care.
Greenleaf.
Right.
Yeah, we went to Greenleaf, but the problem initially was because she had a suicide attempt, and because it could be difficult to get into any of these, you know, nursing homes or assisted living, just normally, there's waiting lists and whatnot. The fact that she had that black mark on her record.
It was kind of this red flag that
Yeah.
a lot of the communities.
Red flag.
And that's the most difficult part in this situation, is that from Buttonwood, you have medical records that reflect something. But when I met Marie, it was such a different picture than what was written all over the records. She was hysterical. She was bubbly. She was so friendly. It was just such a different picture versus what all the medical records say of suicidal ideations and in Buttonwood behaviors. It was just remarkably different.
And my mom had never, her entire life, ever had any kind of mental health issue where anything revolving around, you know, suicide or anything like that. So Kathleen's right. That wasn't my mom. That was a very small snapshot of something that was going on that could have been brought on by the UTI potentially, or a combination of things. But so between us and Kathleen and, advocating, I drove around to some different places. We have friends that are sort of in this business as well, and having a very kind of like strong, team behind us, we were able to get her to go to Greenleaf.
And Greenleaf was not where we wanted her to be. I would definitely say it was, as soon as we could get her out of there, it was really what we wanted to do.
But it was a stepping stone.
Yeah, it was.
We knew that we had to get to a stepping stone.
And you mentioned that to me when we first sat down. You were about to share the transition to Wesley.
Right. Exactly. So brief stint at Greenleaf. She did pretty good at Greenleaf. And I'll also say that her rehab went really, really well. Physically, she was able to get around a lot better. We were seeing her a lot when she was at Greenleaf. We'd go there sometimes, but I'd go and pick her up and bring her to the house. And she was doing better than she had as far as mobility in years.
She was like running with her walker into the house. We were like, whoa, slow down, slow down.
Got it over her head like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So after she started doing well there, and we started seeing the end of where rehab was going to run out, it was the what's next scenario.
Yes.
We didn't want to leave her at Greenleaf, and we thought that she could make it and do assisted living. So we went to go visit Wesley. Thought it was super nice at Wesley. Looked at this apartment for her that I think was beautiful. I mean, if I was a bachelor, I'd probably live in it and like not think anything about it.
I toured these personal care homes, and I'm like, this is nicer than my house.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like every single thing in this place was brand new.
Yeah. And they're redoing like a lot right now too. So they're like putting a bar downstairs. We're like, a bar.
Wow.
They're doing this one whole wing, and they're having a restaurant. It's gonna be called like the Grill, and it's gonna have a bar. And I said to Melissa, like maybe on the weekend I'll take her out on a date and we'll like go over to Wesley, maybe have a
couple cocktails,
at the bar,
group to some show tunes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we liked Wesley. We were, I would say that she was, in my view, and Kathleen knows better than me, she may have been on the edge of sort of like the assisted living with mobility and being able to take care of herself.
But they accepted her into it.
Did,
they were like, they didn't give us a hard time about that at all.
They accepted her. She moved in. Took a little bit of time, several weeks, and then all of a sudden she really started acclimating, and everybody loved her there. That made it a lot easier, because if there was going to be an event where they were going to have singing or something like that, which she liked to do, they would go get her and say, hey, there's a thing.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just rely on her getting her walker and going to.
Now, Tony, when did she move into Wesley? What month?
The very end of December. Like, it was like
so
December 30th.
I think it was the week before, between Christmas and New Year.
Yeah.
So she was there for, call it January, February, and then March came.
Yeah.
Yep.
And everything shut down.
Yeah. March 9th was the last day we saw her before with everything with COVID.
So
that was hard.
I'd like to get your thoughts on that. What was your experience? And there's also, I really want to spend some time on kind of what the whole progression here. But what was your experience from March 9th forward? What were the positives? What did you see that the community did well? What did you see just overall? Because, Wesley wasn't alone. It was all these communities who were struggling with what to do.
Right.
What did you see that was a frustration? What did you see that was a positive? What did you see that could be changed? Things like that.
I think that, positive, she had the people that she was close to there were really like, they would take care of her. I would say a negative off the bat, and we didn't know this originally, but I guess each nurse stays with somebody for 3 months and then they move on to other. And I think that that's kind of hard. Like, I understand that they don't want them to get too close to people or do that, but that she had nurses that knew what she needed. And then you're starting off with brand new people, and, it was hard for her to like adjust to that. I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, these people, I mean, the one woman, the nurse, like, like calls, like she's her mom, you know what I mean? She loved her, and she would always come visit her and stuff.
She still texts me.
Yeah. It's
that's
great.
wonderful.
Yeah. I think that the bad thing is once they closed down the restaurant for them to go have that's social, like there was no more games, and basically everybody was just locked in their rooms. I could see how, for a lot of people, how depressing and how, I mean, you know, you're at the end of your life. I mean, his mom would say this all the time. I'm at the very end and I can't be with the people that I love, and I can't, you know, see anybody. I can't socialize with anybody. They were good where they gave her like a little poker game to take into her room. So she had something, she loved playing, like, you know, she loved Atlantic City.
This little plastic poker game, you know, like it looks like it was made in like 1987.
I can hear the sound too, like a really tin beep, beep, beep. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, it's funny you bring that up. You know, we really, when this all hit, and Kathleen can testify to this even more than I, we had days of meetings internally on how to address this, because it was, social isolation can be as dangerous as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, as drinking a lot. It has a very negative, not only psychological, but also physical effect. And Kathleen, I mean, we spend hours trying to figure out how to advocate and finally getting our footing and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do to get families to at least be able to communicate with their loved ones.
Yeah, and I think that's, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. It's just, if someone didn't die of COVID, we've been saying that they could die with COVID just because of that social isolation and being confined to the room, not seeing their family. And that was one of the main reasons of bringing Marie on this side of the bridge, was so that you could be with her and you could see her regularly. And that was taken away from her and you.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't teach her how to use like the phone and FaceTime, I can't even imagine. I mean, I think that was her only like lifeline to be able to see us. Like that's the only
FaceTime was a lifesaver. Yeah. But I will tell you this, that one of the nurses at Wesley told me that the impact that we're talking about of this isolation did have a massive impact on a lot of people there.
Sure.
And she said a lot of people that were doing well, maybe didn't get COVID, but got really sick or really deteriorated suddenly.
We've seen big deterioration with dementia. You know, our families that have loved ones with dementia, they saw a more rapid decline because of the isolation. And everybody on this call knows this. Staring at these four corners, it's nice to have this interaction. But Tony, Melissa, Kathleen, we'd all rather be sitting around our conference table, having coffee and talking about this and staring at a box.
Right, right.
No doubt. So that absolutely impact.
Now, Tony, you and I spoke last week, and I remember that I reached out. It was later in the evening. The day kind of got away from me. Everything was quiet around me. You know, the kitchen was all shut down. The girls had gone to sleep. And you and I were having a conversation, and it was very touching and a little chilling. You know, what maybe chilling is not the right, but kind of haunting, the experience that you had with your mom towards the end of her life. And I'd really love for you to share that with us and with everyone that watches this.
So over the past couple of months, well, first of all, my mom developed this fever one day during the lockdown.
It's the beginning of COVID.
They were very concerned that it was COVID. She had a high fever. They transferred her to the hospital. She got the COVID test, which she said was horrible. And she ended up being negative. Yeah. Imagine being almost 90 getting that. So she did not have COVID. She did have bacterial pneumonia, and she had an infection on her leg that was leading her towards sepsis. She came back from that. She comes back from everything. She recovered from that, went back to Wesley. She was doing okay.
The very end of May, she called us freaking out because she was
just one morning on our normal, FaceTime call. She called us and she had that look of panic, and she was extremely nauseous.
Yeah, she was throwing up. She was like, I don't know what to do. I think I have to go to the hospital. And she had wanted to take that off the table. She didn't want to go to the hospital again.
Yeah, she had a DNH in place.
Yeah.
So at that point, but she was like, no, I think I need to go to the hospital. she felt that sick.
They can't do anything for me here. So she did go to the hospital, and that's when we found out that she had a bowel obstruction. They gave her options of having surgery or she'd die within a few days. And she's like, I'm almost 90 years old. I'm not having surgery. So we made the plans to release her back to her apartment, with hospice. Hospice with Wesley, they allowed us to come in, which was great to finally be able to see her. I will never forget, like, us walking in there and her crying and like the joy on her face that she could finally see us after like all those months.
Yeah, because we just walked in her room one day. It wasn't like, she didn't expect it. It was like, she just saw us all of a sudden one day. So the doctor told her she would die in a couple of days, and everybody in the medical profession that we spoke to was like, yeah, the bowel obstruction like this, it's, a couple of days or a week. A couple of people there told us that they had not expected her to make it through that weekend when did she go on a Thursday or Friday?
Yeah, Thursday.
And this was in May, right? May of this year.
This was June 4th is when she got brought back to Wesley.
So anyway, she not only went a couple of days, but the whole duration was about 7 weeks that she was on hospice. And for a good part of that, I would say a good 5.5 to 6 weeks, she was okay. She wasn't in any pain. Hospice was seeing her. She wasn't even really having to have any pain meds. She could not eat. Food repulsed her. She tried a couple bites here and there. It made her sick. And then she realized, I can't do it. She was able to have a little bit of liquid. So our routine was, she loved Rita's. So we would go get her water ice, and we'd just stock her up with a couple different flavors of water ice.
What's your favorite flavor?
Chocolate.
Me too.
I don't get that. I
love
if I
that.
have water ice, it's got to be a fruit flavor. But
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I'm the same way too, but I must admit, the chocolate is pretty good though. The chocolate's pretty good, especially if you put it with the vanilla gelato. So she would have her little bit of water ice, and she'd have a couple sips. And when I say sips, I mean we're talking tablespoons of water.
Yeah.
So throughout that period, I mean, we were going to see her every day. Our kids were going and seeing her.
It was really nice to have that time, and I honestly believe that she held on as long as she did to be able to take that time in, to be able to like spend that time with us and be with us as long as she could.
She went a long time.
She give or take lost about 7 weeks to COVID. I mean, from March through April, May, actually even longer than that. She lost
restrictions. Yeah.
So it's like she was like, I'm
She's
going to take
making up for that lost time.
I truly believe that she was doing it. I mean, she was her normal self. Like, she was just, she was tired more, but kids would come and play cards with her. Like,
I mean, every morning you'd speak to her on FaceTime, and it's a new day, and you'd say, how you doing?
I'm still here.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm still here. And everybody was just mesmerized by this, because there didn't really seem, other than the fact that she was losing weight, there really didn't seem to be any kind of progressive decline in her like overall health or her mental function. So
and how was it, when it came to that last week, what was going on?
So July 4th, she called us and she was like, I feel really nauseous. And she was like dry heaving. So that was, I think, the turn. And it was that was on July 4th. Then July 5th, she was in and out of being able to talk normally and knowing what's going on and talking, but then she'd be talking about things that didn't make sense, or talking about visits she's had, and it would all be visits from people that are deceased. She actually, it was funny, she's like, your dad came to visit and he said he wants to sleep over on the couch. We're like, oh yeah? And she's like, yeah, but he snores. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, but she was like in and out of this like state where you could like talk and she knew, and then she would be like, it felt so real. And she was very tired. And I'd say the next day, it was a little bit more like where she was just sleeping, where she wasn't completely unconscious. Like, you could kind of talk to her and she would say, certain things.
You get a little bit of a response.
Yeah. The next day was a little bit more minimal. Her breathing, she started doing that. What's that breathing called?
Shane Stokes breathing, which I never knew what I just learned what that was.
She was like, stop for like a minute to a minute and 15 seconds and then take like, 8 breaths and then do the same. Like that was the cycle.
Yeah, mind blowing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you try to do that, try not to breathe for a minute and 15.
I got it to 20 seconds. So
I can't swim across a pool underwater, and that can't take more than half a minute.
Yeah, so I'm trying to imagine a 90-year-old woman who's ill doing this, and it went on for days and days and days.
Yeah, she went like unconscious on like that Wednesday. Like that's when you couldn't talk to her, like where she would respond anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just a waiting game at that
and
point.
we would spend, it was hard because, we have 2 younger kids but we wanted to be there with her. So every day we would, get our stuff done that we need to get done in the morning. And then we would go over there, we would be there with her for a long time. And then we'd leave for dinner, feed the kids, get them situated, and then go back there and stay till 11. Cause it's like, you feel like you don't want to leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to. And then, the nurses are like, well, maybe she wants to be alone when she passes, so you're like, well, I don't know,
nobody knows
nobody
anything.
knows anything.
She went 7 weeks. Everything's off the table.
Yeah.
We wanted to be there. And I told her this while she was still fine, that we wanted to be there when she did pass away eventually. She knew that. And I think she wanted us to be. I mean, it was really, she got her wish in that she was in no pain at all. I never saw her in any kind of distress other than that day when, she felt the stomach issues coming on. But in her final days, she was in no distress.
There was only like the one day early on where she was like agitated. And she was like trying to get out of bed. We were like, it was scary for us because you don't.
That's another thing, like the Shane Stokes breathing. What do they call that? They call it terminal agitation. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
Terminal agitation. So when people are on their last days, all of a sudden, they'll get this like burst of energy and sort of like confusion. And maybe they were laying there like you thought they were going to pass for days, and all of a sudden they're trying to get out of bed and they're sitting up. So it was pretty disturbing to see that, but that only lasted, a couple of hours during one day.
Yeah, early on in the week. That was
on the so on the following Saturday, which is the day that she ended up passing away. That wasn't our normal routine that Melissa just described because Melissa was working. So she was at work. I was here with the kids. And so we weren't going to get to do the typical routine of going there. And then she came home, and by the time we got situated, it was probably around 4 or so that we headed over there to see her. And, we have our normal routine every day for 7 weeks. When we would go in, we'd go up next to her, and she was asleep, and we'd whisper in her ear and tell her, hey, it's Anthony or it's Melissa. We love you. We're here. And then we'd sit down and kind of watch her breathe,
Yeah, I went up to her first, and I, gave her a kiss on her forehead, and I said, hey, Mom, it's Melissa. We're here.
But you should start with the fact that when we walked in the room, initially, we looked at her and we saw her. She was in one of those phases of that Shane Stokes breathing where she was taking the breaths. Okay. And we walked in right after she was taking those breaths. And then Melissa went up to her.
Yeah, and I did. And then you did.
And then I think this is the part you're talking about, Bryan. I went over to her and I gave her a kiss on the side of her head, and I said, it's Anthony, and we're here. And I sat down. Melissa was on one side, I was on the other side. I told her I loved her. And we were sitting there, and at that point,
when you kissed her,
when I kissed her, she was still taking those breaths, but when I kissed her, I felt like she took a breath that was different than the other breaths. It had a little bit more of maybe a gasp to it. I wouldn't call it alarming, but it was different for sure. And then we sat down, and we were expecting.
You're waiting for a minute.
You're waiting for the minute to go by.
So then the minute kind of went by, and the clock in my head, and a little longer and a little longer, and then I'm looking at her, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then I hit the timer on my phone, and I waited like another minute, and I wasn't seeing her breathing. And
he said to me, he's like, I think she's gone.
I said, I think she's gone. And we kind of sat there. I didn't rush and go get anyone. We kind of had that moment there. We you know, we knew she was gone. And that's the moment when I realized that when I kissed her, that was when she let go at that instant, which is.
She waited for us to be there.
And Melissa, you and Marie became even closer during all this. I mean, you were close to begin with, but this really brought you together.
Yeah, no, I mean, she was, you know, it's like normally you'd see her and they would come over and it's like all the kids and the family, and we never really had that like one-on-one, just because, you know, my father-in-law was such like a vibrant person, and he just, you know, kind of like she would be in the background kind of thing, you know, but over this time, like we just, you know, we got so much closer. Like I would go and spend time with her, and when she would come here and she would like have accidents, and, you know, I would have to help her in the bathroom, and, you know, I never made her feel like, she was always like, oh, did you ever think that you'd be doing this for your mother-in-law? I'm like, Mom, it's no big deal. It's, you know, it is what it is. And I have no problem helping you. And yeah, we became really close. Like we really.
And Melissa, that's the only time you've ever referred to Marie as your mother-in-law, is when she referred to herself as that. You, since I've known you, only referred to Marie as Mom.
Yeah.
Really, you weren't taking care of your mother-in-law, you were taking care of your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was. And she just, I mean, she was just such a wonderful woman. She was just the way she looked at like people and the way she looked at life. And I mean,
so some of the things that really strike me with my mom, that, you know, we can only hope for. This whole time as she was sick, getting poked, prodded, everything, and then eventually, you know, terminal, she never had any regrets. No regrets. Nothing. When I say nothing,
enviable. That's an enviable.
I say nothing. There wasn't one thing. In fact, she would say, I did everything I wanted to do. I had a great life.
She loved, I mean, and I think that's what made me and her so close. I mean, I would go there and I would just spend time with her and we would just talk, and, you know, we didn't ever have that opportunity to like connect like that. And just, she was just such a, like a genuine woman.
She didn't care about anything but her people.
Yeah.
You know, when we had to deal with the house, and, you know, that was a lot, right? You know, getting the house emptied, moving, you know, a house
it continues. The process continues.
50-year-old home, doing all of that. She pretty much just was like, it's a house, bye.
I think that
there's no attachment to it.
Well, there was an attachment, I think, but she wouldn't say it with him around, but she said to me she never wanted to go back to the house or anything from the house because it was just
except for
too
the
hard.
one watch. Remember, she would always bring up the watch.
Oh yeah, no, that, and then she got the watch and she's like, I can't see it. It was like this little tiny watch. Oh,
it's funny because every time I would talk to you I would check in with you in recent weeks, you would always say that she's just saying she's ready to go. She's ready to go. But I think it's essentially because she, like you said, had no regrets. She was content. She was content with the life that she lived. Didn't have any regrets, like you said.
No regrets.
I think it makes the end a little bit easier.
The humor, there's a story that you guys will crack up. You know, me and my mom had such a close relationship, and, you know, I'm adopted. So I think for me at least, and for her, that makes it even, you know, more special. But there was one day and it was early on when she was terminal. We thought she could have died any day. I would look at her every time we'd have our visit. I'd look at her and I'd just look in her eyes at the end, and she'd look at me in this kind of gaze, and I'd say, I love you. And she would smile and say, I love you. And I said, you know, Mom, every day we do this. And she looked at me and she goes, I know what you're thinking. I said, what's that? She goes, am I ever going to see you again? And I said, exactly, every day. That's like what we do. So the next day came, or it might have been that day. And, you know, after the visit, and it was time to go. And I looked at her and she looked at me and she smirked and she said, I hope I don't see you tomorrow.
That's
a great anecdote.
Gosh.
So, Tony, Melissa, to wrap up here, if you could give anybody that's watching this one piece of advice, and you guys have really handled the whole spectrum. You dealt with acute care, psychiatric care, nursing home, rehab, hospice, assisted living, sudden death, long drawn out death. What's a piece of advice you would give?
Well, number one is definitely don't wait to prepare for these things, because you absolutely never know what they're going to be. And like you said, we did see the gamut. The only thing that we didn't see was a long drawn out process in Medicaid, right? But
Fortunate. That was fortunate.
That was fortunate. We'll knock on wood for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you should not wait till the end to prepare for these things. You should do them while you're still healthy and of solid mind, and not, at a point where you're fearing your end is coming, where you can make, really good decisions.
And I would also say, like, don't think you can do it all on your own, because there's so much, and you're going through so many emotions at the same time of having to deal with all these big decisions to make. I mean, the help and the guidance was huge. I mean, because we were both like, well, what do we do now? Like, where do we go from here?
If there was anything in the world that you need to be active instead of reactive on, this is one of them, for sure.
Well said.
Call Rothkoff Law Group now.
And then we'll flash the banner underneath.
Yes.
Guys, that's a great point for us to wrap up. I truly thank you for sharing the breadth of that story. We've been talking with a number of the families that we work with, and they all have something different to share. And Tony, I'm so thankful, Melissa, I'm so grateful that you two agreed to talk to us, particularly this close to, everything is still very raw.
Right.
But I wanted to get some of that emotion here, because I think that a lot of people are suffering and celebrating the same way you two are. And I want them to know that they're not alone. And I want them to know that there are people out there that went through it, and there are resources out there to help them. So thank you all, truly. Again,
thank you
I'm Bryan,
and I'm Kathleen. No, I was just going to say thank you for letting us be a part of your parents' journey too. And like Bryan said, you've been through so much, so it's really has been our privilege to help you.
Absolutely. And I mean what I said, that I don't know how it would have gotten through this. I mean, it's pretty amazing that literally, what was this, a few days, when we first met you guys, a few days before my dad passed away, if that wouldn't have happened, it would have been a really, really bad situation.
I mean, I can't imagine how it would have been, like, if we didn't have the guidance when we did, because it was like, oh my God, your life is like just like turned upside down in 1 second.
Immediately, right?
And I will tell you this: a lot of people don't have this elder planning in place, because a lot of friends, family, they're hearing our story. I'm having conversations. I say, we had just gone, and we were dealing with elder law, and most people haven't done this.
Most people don't know it's a thing until they're in a crisis like you guys are.
Right. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I'm saying, like, you guys have everything, like, the social work. I mean, if you're just going to an attorney, like, they're going to give you the, the legal, but
that's the game changer, 100%.
Having Kathleen with having that more of like, not that you don't care, Bryan, but I'm just saying, like,
Thank you.
I'm just saying, like, that to help you with those decisions that you're making for your loved ones, and knowing that they're looking at them like Kathleen kind of looked at her like it was her own mom, like what she would do. I mean, we would ask her, if this was your mom.
Yes.
I
know all of your questions would start with that. If this was your mom, what would you do? I appreciate.
You can't, this kind of stuff, you can't fake it. I'm talking about from Kathleen's perspective, you too, bro. I mean, when she's like, she's there, she's meeting with my mom. You can't fake that you care.
Thank you.
It's impossible. And it was extremely apparent that she did care a lot.
Thank you.
Let me tell you, I hear that. I mean, far more. I hear your sentiment is echoed by many, many, many families. Rarely is it the other way around. Rarely do I hear, oh, Kathleen's okay, but Bryan, boy, are you amazing. So it's like, Bryan, you go sit in the corner and let us talk to Kathleen. So guys, thank you
well,
again.
thank you.
truly
That
for
means a
taking
lot.
the time. Again, Bryan Adler, elder law attorney with Rothkoff Law Group, and we also have Kathleen Magee,
Director
our
of Care
director.
Coordination. Thank you.
And again, Tony and Melissa, thank you again for taking the time. And I'll talk to you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yep.
you will.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
Take
guys.
care, guys.
All right,
Great
take
day.
care.
Bye-bye.